First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you for joining us. That is our live look there from our ski bowl camera up on Mount Hood. As you can see, the weather is pretty nice and it looks beautiful out there. It does make me want to get out and get camping into that forest, wherever it may be. And we have a lot of those, but we're going to be talking about the forests here during this segment. Again, this is Fox 12 Now. We live stream here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, starting at 1 o'clock every weekday, going throughout the afternoon. And we cover a wide range of topics, and we get to have some longer form discussions, something that I think if anybody lived in the Northwest in 2020, you are well aware of the extremely devastating wildfires that happened during that season. We get wildfires every year, but that year was particularly pretty awful, especially here in the northwest part of the state, but really all over the place. And one of the big things from that is, what can we learn? What can we learn about wildfires? What can we learn about the recovery of our forests? So that's in part what a new PSU study covers. And we are joined now by one of the people behind that study, and that is Andres Holz, an associate professor at Portland State University. And I say associate professor, but I know that you're working in a lot of specific departments there within Portland State. And Andres, if you wouldn't mind, could you let everybody know what that is that you're working on?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. So I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geography, and I'm within the School of the Earth Environment Society at PSU. And the study looked at the 2020 wildfires impacts, not just of the fire itself during that early September event, but actually what happened 1, 2, up to 3 years following the fire. And we learned that something actually that after the fact sounds very simple and obvious, but at the time we know very little, is that the boundary of the fires actually is not static, and fires continue to grow. That is to say that trees that survived the fire but actually were injured by the fire due to drought and insects down the road start dying. So slowly the actual boundary of those perimeters of the fires growth, and trees continue to die.
Wow, so because of those different factors, and I guess that does make sense, it's not like it's just a hard line of, okay, that's it, everything's fine here, everything's not. And I didn't even think about, an insect factor or different infestations or things that could happen from things that were pushed out of the fire, I would imagine. So when you're looking at that, what were some of the big things that were having an effect on some of these trees outside what we maybe traditionally thought was the boundary of the fire?
Yeah, for these particular fires that were so severe, right? If folks recall, the easterly winds were massive, and so fires were spraying really, really fast. The key driving aspect was the mortality or the severity and the length of the flames, the intensity, the heat, and so on and so forth. Other studies that have done looking at fires that were not that severe found out that there are things like the drought levels following the fires are actually very important. In our case, for these particular fires, the severity of the initial fire was the key. 6 months, I'm lying here, let's see, 9 months after the fires, we had the heat dome. And so we did not necessarily look at that specifically, but we speculate that that also had an important effect on these trees that, again, were exposed by the fire, were injured by the fire, but survived the very first year, but did not necessarily survive the second or third year after the fire.
So got through that fire, but then with those compounding factors, it sounds like really played a big role in them not surviving past that. Is this something where had we not had a heat dome or gone through a drought, is this something where some of those trees would have survived, or is it likely they would have died no matter what?
That's a great question. I don't think we have enough data to answer that, but my hunch, based upon the other studies, I was involved also in one of them, is that if we had wet years following the fires, the mortality certainly would have been less. Again, because of these 2020 wildfires were so intense, if you look at a map, the proportions of trees that died right away was disproportionately high compared to most events across the Western U.S.
And when you talk about some of these other trees dying after the fact, several months, a year afterward, what kind of an effect does that have on the recovery of those areas of the forest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we look at fire perimeters, the burn area, particularly areas that experience high mortality due to that heat and flames. And you look even closer, let's say in, I don't know, any browser where you have a map, you can see tiny little islands of forest that actually was not consumed by the flames. We call those fire refugia. These are like green islands that actually are left there. And those are super important because they provide habitat for species, for birds, for mammals that actually need shade within this sea of mortality, of blackness. And so they also provide the seeds for the future forest. And this particular study paid very close attention to those fire refugia, and we learned that the perimeter and the area of those shrunk and become smaller and smaller, and many of them actually collapsed. We found that up to 375% of the area of this refugia collapsed in 3 years. And that means fewer and fewer seeds for the future forest to recover.
Wow, that's, and I definitely know what you're talking about. There's some particular areas that were my favorite camping areas that were kind of one of those parts of those spots that were somehow saved in the middle of that fire, but seeing that that can also shrink after the fact. So, you know, when you look at this as a whole and see what the cause, you know, what the effects can be of this expansion, what can we learn from a study like this as far as any kind of preventative measures or anything that we can do in the future to help mitigate some of those issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are two aspects. One of them is that we live in a landscape on the west side of the Cascades in Oregon, particularly in central and northern Oregon, wet forest, is that we have historically plenty of fuels. And so fuel issues like in southwestern Oregon or like in eastern and central Oregons, where fuel is the issue, and we have more fuels because of fire suppression. On this wet forest, fuels is not the issue. We had fuels for thousands of years, very thick forest. It's about how now the fuels are not wet anymore. They are actually dry. And that's climate change right there. And so we don't necessarily need to put a lot of attention to focus on fuel management rather than on ignition management. We need to be very cognizant that when we have fires that are starting in this very wet forest, we have now predictions a week ahead of time when winds are going to change, for instance. And that's where we need to allocate or reallocate resources to prevent those fires to spread so quickly. The large majority of fires across the West do not spread that quickly. And so it's something that we can learn about. The second aspect that I think is also as important is that although it sounds that all these are bad news, they're actually silver lining important takeaways, such as the fact that having areas that are not going to recover full of trees right away is actually probably good, because this is going to open up landscapes for flowers, for shrubs, for insects, for bees, for butterflies, for birds. And so biodiversity actually probably is going to increase. And that is a good thing.
Interesting. So keeping some of those areas without the trees in there can actually, benefit some of those other species, other flora, fauna, everything above that, I guess.
Exactly. And so the Forest Service, for the audience, has a mandate called replant, that they have to go and replant areas that are burned, which is understandable from a timber standpoint and from a tree and forestry standpoint. But for a bigger picture standpoint, for the ecosystems and things like clear water and air and carbon and nutrients and habitat, variability, heterogeneity, differences in how ecosystems work and look like is better than homogeneity.
So letting those natural processes take place in there instead of replanting necessarily trees in all of those areas would be your recommendation as far as increasing and maintaining, I guess, the biodiversity of those places.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
Wow, interesting. And for this study, now you mentioned the Forest Service there. Is this anything that you, presented to them, or things that they could start adopting into how they manage areas after wildfires?
Yeah, they are very aware of this, and we have ongoing conversations with the Forest Service, with Oregon Department of Forestry, and this is policy at the federal level, and so there's not necessarily a lot that local personnel can do. But we are definitely in close conversations, and they are interested in these findings for sure as well.
Just overall, how important were these 2020 wildfires, not only, I mean, for the devastation side of things, clearly that's something that we all witnessed, but how important were they for this educational side and information that you're gathering and learning as a result of them?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I think from our standpoint, these were unprecedented fires. There was the first time there were so many people living by these fires being impacted. I think we broke the record for 1 week for the worst air quality in the world. And so that impact, it's humongous. In terms of the actual educations of the fires and the role of these fires in the natural ecology of these systems have also been fascinating, where I teach here at PSU, bringing the students to the field and let them see by themselves what the scale of these fires are. It's really, as an educator, it's actually a fascinating experience, especially when you tell them that ecologically this is not unprecedented, and we have seen many forests of this magnitude and severity in the past. And again, it's us and our emotions that are in the way that we have this internal conflict.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it really is, just looking at it from all those different angles. Well, Andres, I want to say thank you very much, for having time to join us, and for everybody out there who wants to learn more and follow along with your study and some of this information that you learned and are presenting to people. What's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, I think, again, the Forest Service, Oregon Department of Forestry, ODF. In terms of our research, I lead the Global Environmental Change Lab at PSU, where we post our findings, our research, and if people wants to send me a line, email me, I'll be happy to chat with everyone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate it. It's illuminating to learn more about this huge event that happened here, and just some of the, I guess, as you mentioned, it's not all negative. It's learning about how this works and the positives of that, and understanding it to better manage some of those things in the future. So thank you very much for being here on Fox 12 Now.
Oh, you bet. Thanks so much, Greg.
And for everybody watching, we're going to take a break, but we are live streaming here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. As we do every weekday, we get to have these longer form discussions like this. So please download that Fox 12 Oregon app and check out some of our other segments in our interviews and our discussions we get to have. If you have an idea for one, send me an email, fox12now@kptv.com, and I'll see what we can do. But for right now, I'll talk to you later. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now. All right. Thank you very much.
Super.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Glad to help.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll get you a link to this too once we have one. And yeah, and say hi to Alec. Sorry we didn't get him on.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with Alec. Okay, but we'll do that. Yeah, I mean, he deserves all the credit. He did this humongous study and for his master's. So he's the really data wizard. Now he works as a he works for
go ahead.
Sorry, geospatial company.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. And I see here's the photos you sent over, and then do you have? Oh, yep, and there's the link. Okay, I'm going to reply back with that license that I was talking about, and get that to you, and then I can get that to my team. I'll email that to you right now.
Cool.
And then there's just a reply accept if everything's good for you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, the figures from the papers, I think you might have to, even though it's open access, you might have to acknowledge that they are from the journals or from the papers at least, or something like that.
Okay. Would that be something that Christina would be?
Yeah, maybe contact Christina. I'm ignorant about this part.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's those figures, the diagrams that I'm looking at, the links to the maps.
Yeah, the maps are cool. So I think
is that something that you're able to, or is that something I would need to go through Christina?
I think you might have to go through Christina,
okay.
Just to be on the safe side. My hunch is that it should be okay, but you should not quote me.
Okay. Yep, no worries. I'll put attention to her in that too.
Cool.
Okay. All right. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Oh, you bet, Greg.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Be well.